The Witcher. Something that has blown us all away since The Witcher 3 was made. The TV show, the books, the older games. It's something that I think we all have cherished once in our life. I actually remember one time being laid off a couple years ago and having the time, the ability to actually play through the 80 some hours of this game. And I finally beat it and I absolutely loved it. I soon after spent a lot of time playing the first game and then trying to play the second game, but that one is a little bit difficult. But it always rings in my mind as something that I really enjoyed, just from the music, the art style, the absolute beauty of the world, and the character development within. It's something that really, I think, sticks out to all of us. And when I seen The Witcher, A Grain of Truth on Amazon for a mere $12, a hardcover edition at that, I knew that it was something I was gonna have to check out. And while I was a little worried that this was gonna be kind of just a TV show or a game tie-in, something that doesn't have too much substance and maybe something that doesn't quite go as hard and as visceral and real as the game and the TV show goes, I was pleasantly surprised. They do not hold back. Geralt stays true to his character, and they don't leave any of the nitty-gritty out at all. The Witcher: A Grain of Truth is a story about Geralt kind of coming across this castle, and what he needs to do is find some money so he can feed Roach his oats, get himself some food, maybe some maidens at that, and what he ends up finding is something totally different. He actually finds a nice companion to chat with, and something that I'm very excited to read with you guys. And it all begins with Geralt sitting on top of his horse in this beautifully done artwork. I will say right off the bat, one thing that I love about this comic book is it uses a lot of color palettes for every different page to really make things pop out, from greens to oranges to browns and tans. I think it really makes it pop to the eye. But as Geralt is strolling down this little trail, kind of talking to Roach, oats for horses, but for vultures, carcasses. He looks to Roach, and Roach just isn't saying anything. Of course, he's a horse, but he got that classic Geralt humor. He says, "Not gonna answer, huh? Figures you stay silent." And suddenly there's all these crows off in the distance that Geralt is noticing, and he heads towards them. Might be some work for me in this. Might just be a hot pile of dung. We don't stray our path. We'll never find out. And as Geralt is moving forward, he starts to notice a little trail of blood, alright? He's using the Witcher senses, and he comes across these two bodies. And these don't look like your average vagrant peasants, alright? They actually look like they have some jewels and other things like that on them. And he comes closer to investigate. He sees these bodies are all torn up, shredded, okay? Their throats are agape. They have these massive claw marks on their faces. Werewolves or Leshen wouldn't leave all this for scavengers. Humans wouldn't leave all this for grave robbers. Though it could be things got out of hand. Wouldn't be the first time. The woman's companion by the looks. They came from Miriville. An armorer. And he sees this coin down by this man, and it has an anvil on top of it. He crouches down and he picks up this blue rose from the lady's body, and he says, "But what possessed them to turn off the damn road? Cut through the woods. Man died where he lies. Woman tried to flee, then fell and died." And as he's looking at this rose, he notices that it is blue, and he says, "Never seen a rose this color before." He puts it back down, and he takes another gander at these bodies, and he realizes, there's no way that this was wolves either. Something very mischievous is going on here, and this could be a very profitable situation for him. He says, "Whatever killed these two, it didn't leave any tracks. I know, Roach. I could look the other way, head back to the road, but if we keep our noses out of incidents like this, won't even be enough coin for your oats." And suddenly the crows fall down, and they're eating out of these bodies, and they're enjoying themselves a nice snack. Geralt and Roach kind of ride on, and suddenly Roach flies up, okay? He is freaking out. This horse has been spooked. Geralt pulls out one of his signs, he starts doing his little hand gesture, and he pulls out an axe. And you actually get to see this, and this is something I quite enjoyed. I was wondering how this would be shown in the comic books, but they do a really good job at animating all these different casts that the Witcher has. He uses a lot of axe, he uses a lot of Quen, and I guess that's about all the ones that he's going to use in the story. But it looks very cool as you see him doing his hand thing and seeing the axe triangle appear over Roach's head. Is it as bad as all that? Really that bad? And he looks off in the distance, and he sees a tower nearby, and what do? They head to it. Witchers are very much for the quest. They'll do anything for coin. And suddenly he looks behind him and he sees this woman off in the tree. She's in this white dress and she's kind of just giving him the eyeballs. He says, "Greetings," and she just looks at him, doesn't say anything, and suddenly she runs away, and Roach is spooked once again, and he has to use the axe one more time. And they approach the front door, and Geralt just kind of says, "It just keeps getting better." He goes towards the door. It's got this bearish door knocker on it, and as he's about to pull on it, the door just just starts opening on its own. And as Geralt's walking inside, he starts to kind of know that usually when he's led into somewhere so easily, he's bound to leave with a couple scars, a couple gashes, maybe a couple new orifices. And he looks to Roach and he just kind of asks, "What do you think, Roach?" And once again, Roach does not answer, obviously, he's a horse. But he's looking around this immaculate property, and suddenly he sees a bushel of roses. Blue roses at that. And he picks one up, he sniffs it, and suddenly a door behind him slams open, alright? And this giant great beast comes out. This is like a giant hogwart / bear monster, and he's saying, "Begone before I devour you! Begone lest I!" And Geralt just pulls out a silver sword and puts it up to his neck, and he tells him, "Lest you what, sir?" Geralt is not somebody obviously to mess with. He's very trained on killing these monsters. He's basically unfazed by anything. If you know anything about the TV show or the games, basically just nothing breaks past his cold, monotone exterior. And suddenly this beast man just kind of like sits back and he's like, "Lower that blade, man, alright? You broke in on my property, just remember that, okay? I don't want any trouble." "Fair enough. Now you should grasp that this blade can come back out anytime I want. And very, very fast." And this beast man just kind of spits on the ground and he's like, "Obviously, you pulled that on me in like 2.5 seconds. And he says, "Very well, mortal, speak. What do you want? What brings you here?" And Geralt just kind of casually says, I just got lost, that's all." And this boar man just tells me, "Then get found. Follow your arse. It's pointing the way," as is obviously his ass is pointing towards the back gate where he came from. But Geralt is once again unfazed. He just says, "Any water here? Horse is thirsty, as am I." If that's not asking too much. And this boar man is basically just kind of perplexed. Everybody that comes to this said castle is basically utterly terrified by him and bolts out the door. He's never had somebody so casually just come up to him and start asking him for water and food and things like that. And he's just like, "Listen, do you truly not fear me?" And Geralt just says, "Should I?" And this makes this boar man burst out of laughter. And he basically just invites him inside. He says, "Ah, blast it. Trifles all not. Every day I run into somebody who doesn't run upon catching sight of me. Come on in. If, however, you are a thief or a bandit, I warn you, this house obeys my commands. Within these walls, I rule." And they start entering the house, and Geralt's basically just asking him, "Do you live alone, sir? Is it just you here?" And he doesn't want to answer, and he actually just yells the word lights, and suddenly all these candles in the house light up, and Geralt literally just goes, "Nice. It was sick. As I told you, the house obeys my commands. Seems you've something dangling around your neck, guest. Whatever could it be?" And what he's talking about is just Geralt's Witcher pendant. He actually lets him touch it, and this is actually a trick to make sure that he's not an actual monster. Monsters are not able to touch the Witcher pendants. Basically just a perfect test to see if this man is a beast, or if he's actually been cursed, and it does the trick. The man grabs it, and he says, "Quite the nasty snarl on this beast. What's the meaning?" "Guild emblem." "Ah, the Muzzle Maker's Guild, I gather. This way, please." And he sits him down at this giant table. He's in this awesome room filled with armory, filled with a bunch of different skulls, and they start their conversation, which is going to take up the majority of this book. And it's actually very interesting as you get to learn about the origins of this beast and how he came to actually be here. And it was really just a pleasant little read. He says, "Sit, guest. Your belly snarls as well, I presume. Wouldn't turn down food, host." And suddenly this bear man clasps his hand together, and you see these sparkles kind of coming, and the entire table is filled with an enormous banquet of turkeys, all kinds of meat, fruit. And he says, "Better than servants, nay. Eat heartily, not but real honest food. Worry you not." And Geralt takes a giant bite of chicken, and he says, I'm not worried." This man is very well versed in all things curses, all things illusionary, and he knows that this food is of real substance, and that this man is just a very powerful spellcaster. And this beast man just asks him his name, and he says, "My name is Geralt, what is yours?" And his name is actually Novellen, and they have a toast to each other. "To your health, Geralt, and to yours, Novellen." Geralt absolutely chugs this thing down like a goddamn frat boy, and suddenly the pitcher with wine in it lifts itself up in midair, and it pours him another cup. And Geralt's just like, "You're magic. You born with those abilities?" "No, acquired them along my current visage, nearly 12 years ago. Puzzling out how I looked before? Third portrait from the fireplace, you see." And he points over to these different portraits, and what do you see is a small, young, stumbly man, and Geralt says, "I see." And this actually enrages the spore, alright? This painting is actually outside of the light of the candles, and he knows that there's no way that no mere man could actually see this. He says, "My portrait, guest, hangs beyond the reach of the candlelight. No man could see it from where you sit. So I ask once more, who in the fiery devils are you?" And the humble Geralt just says, a witcher. If my memory does not deceive, witchers earn their livings in a curious fashion, by killing monsters of various sorts for pay. And he says, your memory serves you well, as he takes another drink from this flask. And they both just kind of start looking at each other. You get this cool artwork of them and their eyes. Obviously, Geralt's eyes are super cool. They're like yellow goat's eyes almost. And things just kind of settle down, and the Beastman just asks him, they say monsters are fewer and further between, yet here you are, sitting across from one. Who paid you for me? And Geralt denies this. He tells him once again, I just got lost, nobody's here to pay you, and why are you so worried about it? He tells him, you're no monster, and this man laughs once again. He says, of course, I am no monster. It's merely the looking glasses pulling a warped sort of jest. Is that it, Witcher? If you were a monster, you couldn't have grabbed my medallion. Somebody cast a spell on you, a curse, and I'm sure you know who. And the boar man basically acknowledges this, and he says, so what if I do? And it's very apparent that Novellen doesn't really want to give anything away. He doesn't want to consort too much with this mysterious witcher. He's pretty afraid that he's actually here to kill him, and he's just trying to kind of prod and pick and figure out, how did he actually find this place? But Geralt just tells him, spells can be lifted in most cases. Want me to try? And he says, no, I do not. He says, have a drink. I'll tell you the whole saga. Witcher or not, you're a kind sight for the eyes, and I'm in the mood for a chat. And he pours him another drink, and from here you get another scene of this beast before he was a beast, Novellen. But you are here at the keep where they are currently standing back way in the day. As you surely beheld, the vicinity is by and large uninhabited. My dearest father, you see, gave none who wandered this way much desire to linger, and all who strayed here lost, in the best possible outcome, their fortunes. And the nearest villages burned when dear Papa felt that they tarried too long delivering tribute. I wept terribly the day they carted in what was left of my old man, after a long sword tore through him. And you basically get to see these villages burning, some of the mischief this old gang used to get up to. They're holding people up at knife point, trying to steal things from their carriages. It fell on me as his heir, to take the reins of his band. I was a youth, then so my chargers had the run of me as quick as a blink. Before long, we took to doing things dear Papa would have never allowed had he lived. One day we ventured as far as Gelibol, near Mert, where we looted a temple, and as ill luck would have it, found a young priestess inside. Geralt asked him what kind of temple this was, and he just says, pox, only knows a benighted one. Skulls and bones lay on the altar, and green flames burned in the hearth. It reeked. And I gotta say, a bit of a warning, there's some very sensitive subject matter in this book. Basically just this part, everything else is a little better, but it does have to do with the R word. And he says, yet I digress. And it shows him at this temple, this little boy and this gang of goons. And it says, the lads pinned down the priestess, tore off her garment, and told me it was time to become a man. And suddenly you see this boy make a stern face, and he says, so I became a man. And it was pretty dark in that aspect, something I really wasn't expecting out of this book, but I guess he does end up getting his comeuppance, but it's still just a horrible thing. But this is The Witcher, and The Witcher has never been just a fantastical land of pleasantries. And Novellen goes on to say, and while I was becoming a man, the priestess spat in my face and screeched out something, that if I am a monster in human skin, so I shall be a monster in monster's skin. Something about love, blood, I remember not exactly. The dagger was tiny, had it hidden in her hair most likely. She killed herself. We took to our heels, almost ran our horses to death. Benighted it was, that temple. And Geralt just has this look on his face. He's not very impressed with this guy. He can already tell that he's a piece of shit, obviously from these events that just happened, and he just tells him to go on. Afterward, all proceeded as the priestess said. A few days later, I woke in the morn to find help mid-screech and mid-flight. It seems, Geralt, that I had panicked, had some kind of attack. And you just see Novellen running through his castle. He's tearing people apart. He has now become this crazy boar man, and he has no control over this. He's just splitting people in half, murdering everybody in sight, and only a few are actually to escape. By the time the attack passed, it was too late for anything. Too late to explain to anybody that only my appearance had changed and nothing more. I was left alone. And you get some really cool artwork of this beast man just kind of punching glass and walls and things shattering as he realizes, that nobody ever in his life is really going to accept him, and that what he's done to this priestess is actually going to ruin his entire life. He's going to be trapped here in this castle, and he's just never going to know love, friendship, nothing. Alright, he's going to live alone as a hated monster. But he says, then came the horrible fear that they would return and kill me before I could explain, but none ever did. I sat in my place for a very long time, quiet as a mouse, until one day some corpulent oaf waltzed in like lord of the manor and cut roses from my auntie's bush. And I'll have you know these weren't any old flowers, but blue roses from Nazir. And as you see this short stubby man coming into this monster's den, he's picking these blue roses, and he actually comes up to him and he asks him what he's doing, and he simply says that he's just picking roses for his beautiful daughter. He just wanted to give her some something sweet, and suddenly the beast tells him it's either your life or your daughter. You will give her to me. And the reason he does this is this monster actually thinks that maybe if he finds some kind of maiden, it might actually break the spell, but this guy actually tells him that his daughter's only been around for 8 springs, so obviously this isn't a viable moral choice that this guy could do, and he feels bad. He takes him into his home, and he gives him all these treasures, and he basically just lets him go. But soon after this, a lot of different merchants kind of hear this story, and they start to come to this castle one by one with their daughters in hand, just wanting some riches, basically deciding to sell their daughters off for a pot of gold. And this is something that happens a lot in the Witcher franchise. People are very known to just give away their loved ones for a better materialistic life. And Novellen starts to tell him about this story, about how a man came up with a sack and his daughter in hand, and he says he had brought a rather ample sack, and we agreed he would leave his daughter with me for a year. I had to help him load his sack onto his mule. He never would have lifted it himself. And Geralt just kind of asks me, whatever happened to this girl? He left his daughter with this giant beast alone in a castle for an entire year. And he says after a month or so, she stopped going into convulsions at the sight of me. She was pleasant, sharp beyond belief, but all the same, I couldn't get myself to do anything about it. Thing is, Geralt, I had always been shy with the ladies, even those raised in a barn with dung still on their calves. The year lingered on, like the stank of unwashed conscripts, until the merchant finally appeared and took her away. Whereupon I resigned and locked myself up in my residence and gave no response to any visitors for several months. But after a year spent in another's company, I understood how hard it was when you don't have anybody to flap your jaw at. The next wench was named Fenna, and here you get some really cool artwork. You see this lady, there's scenes of her like naked on top of this beast scaring off unwanted visitors, and it's just very apparent that these two did have a good time. It says, she was petite, clever, and chirpy, not a speck afraid of me. One day, the anniversary of my cutting, it so happened that we both got drunk, and they say fairy tales hold the wisdom of the ages. Wisdom like that is not worth a heap of shite, Geralt. And it shows these two in bed. Novellen is just looking at himself in the mirror after sleeping with this girl. Yes, there's some intermingling with beast and a human woman. This is kind of a huge factor in this book. It happens a couple times as he's going on with all this. But he says, my muzzle remained as hideous as ever, save mayhap for a more foolish expression. I admit it, I was disappointed and dejected. But then, well, she tried to make me forget all my worries. She even thought up a way to scare off the unwanted guests. Then there were others, Primula, Ilka, and Venemira. It all went the same way, and every time ad nauseum. First, a mixture of fear and reluctance, then budding friendship nurtured by trifling yet expensive gifts, until at last it was bite me, you darling beast, tear into me, you animal, and other such idiocies. And it's quite graphic. You see a lot, alright? You see a lot of things in this. That's all I gotta say for now. But then Novellen just kind of goes on to say, it was always the same thing. These girls would stay for a year, they'd have their friendship or whatever, but no matter what he did, this curse was never actually broken. So what he does is just seal himself back into his castle for a very long time. He stops answering people. He's no longer really interested in these peasants' daughters and things like that. He realizes that his treasury that he's been filling them up with like gold and diamonds is starting to get very low, and he's just kind of feeling used, and he suddenly realizes, that he doesn't really need to change his appearance at all. These ladies seem to like him more than they ever did when he was a human, and on top of that, this spell has actually given him incredible health, alright? He never really dies, he doesn't really age, he's just kind of locked here alone, and he can kind of bear that. And Geralt starts questioning him about what exactly was going on here. Is this something that the girls actually wanted? Are these daughters stolen? And he basically reassures me, that these fathers were happy to take the gold and leave their daughter for a year, and that basically all these girls that came into his house were treated like princesses, and that they could just live basically luxury free, and all they have to do is basically just give this man some companionship, and that they were very glad to do so. He says that chastity is more rare than a rock dragon in these ages. But Geralt doesn't really believe him. He tells him, but you suspected somebody had paid me for you. Who might have that been? And he says, some scoundrel who ran out of daughters but hankered after more of my treasury. Human greed knows no bounds. And after the story is done, Geralt remembers this lady that he's seen just right outside of the castle, and he starts to grill him about, if he actually lives alone. And this beast is dumb with it. He knows that Geralt knows, and he just wants him to stop treating him like an idiot and just come right out and say whatever he's thinking. And Geralt tells him, I seen this lady out in the woods. That why merchants with daughters have been riding empty-handed recently? And he says yes, and you get some more awesome artwork. And as Geralt's about to ask him more about this specific lady, the beast does not want to answer, so Geralt just gets up, he slams one more cup of grog, and he's out of this bitch, alright? He's had enough, he realizes that there's not really any money to be made here, and that he got some food and some good stories, and he is perfectly alright with this. The only question left that Novellen has is that if he really can lift any curses, he tells him, I don't want to become a man, well, I am having these nightmares, and I just want you to tell me if these nightmares are founded. And Geralt tells him, yes, they are. And he hops on Roach, alright? He's leaving the premises, and the last thing they talk about is how this lady does not like men. She only likes the beasties, and Geralt kind of thinks that's a little weird. He seems to think that maybe this lady isn't just a regular woman, and that maybe herself is actually some kind of oddity out in the forest. But anyways, he does leave. He brings Roach to the stream, they get a good drink of water, they're standing next to this mushroom fairy ring, and suddenly Roach goes bonkers once again. He uses the axie, and he calms him down for a second, but he starts to realize that something is off. Anytime this lady comes even close to near them, Roach freaks out, and Roach's instincts are better than anybody else's. Roach can sense beasts, he can sense a certain type of monster, the harmful ones at that, and Geralt tells him, thank you, you have more sense than I do, and he rushes back to the keep. And once he's back towards the door, he hears this singing coming from inside, and he pulls a sword. He tells Roach you don't have to come in, obviously you're scared, and he can't really handle a monster and trying to keep this horse calm at the same time. So he just enters by himself, and what do you see is the lady from the woods sitting on top of a statue, and she's singing this beautiful little tune. There's a bunch of black crows all surrounding her head, and Geralt starts to question her. He says, what are you? Thinking Mula or an Alp, a vampire, but one that doesn't mind the sun? You resemble Rizalka enough to fool anybody. No fooling horses, though. Their instincts recognize your kind without fail. Birds you like, but men, women, you've no problem biting their necks clean through. You and Novellen, oh my, quite a pair. Monster and vampiress. You eternally thirst for blood, and him your defender, a killer at your beck and call. What have you and that raven hair of yours done to him? And she begins to smile at him. She's got some blood on her lips and on his chin, and suddenly she does this like sonic boom scream and knocks Geralt against the wall. He's able to actually deflect this a little bit with his sword, but she is coming in hot. She actually transforms into this weird like bat demonic creature that I've never actually seen in any of the games or heard of. I think it's called a Bruxa, which once again I've never heard of that. I'm sure if you're very well versed in Witcher lore, you probably know what that is. But Geralt is ready. He gets back on his feet and he's fighting this thing off. He's starting to use Quen as this beast is kind of flying back and forth, trying to knock him down and get at his throat. It does scratch his face a couple times, but he gets one good swing on this thing, and finally it is knocked down to the ground for a moment. And he says, scream, vampire. Scream your lungs out. Waste all your strength. Then I'll cut your pretty head off. And it turns back into a human form. And it basically just tells him the same thing, you know, keep casting your spells, and you are the one that was going to lose your head. And he says, we'll see. And as this thing's going on for one more attack, Novellen comes out and he's screaming at this monster. He needs it to stop. He knows it's been killing bystanders that have just been crossing the path to get to his house, and he can't take this anymore. And he's screaming, Verena! She actually has a name, alright, and it is Verena. She just sonic blasts his ass into another wall just like she did Geralt. She's basically lost all control, and while she does care about Novellen, she is just kind of a bloodthirsty monster, and there's not a whole lot that you can do about that kind of thing. And she goes for one more attack against Geralt when suddenly Novellen has this giant spear and he pikes her right through the heart. And she's just kind of standing there. And she says, mine, or no one's. I love you. And as she's dying on this pike, about to bite Novellen for the last time, Geralt comes up and he actually chops her head off. Just clean off. You get this awesome scene, her eyes are open, and she's staring Geralt right in the eyes. And Geralt himself is kind of wondering, you know, what he is. It says, ever fewer monsters around. What about me? What am I? So quiet, so empty, such a void inside of me. And as he's having this moment of reflection, he sees that Novellen is actually turned into a man. And you remember what he said about the young priestess in that temple? The one that he destroyed? He said that she said something about love and blood. Well, Geralt goes to pick up his hand and he just says, get up, Novellen. Get up and let's go. Got herbs, ointments in my saddlebag for the both of us. And Novellen notices that he is no longer this giant 6-foot beast, this 7-foot beast with fangs, a giant pig nose, and he's just feeling his face, and he says, Geralt, no longer, I'm not. And Geralt just tells him not to look. She has no head, she's stabbed on this pike. It's a pretty gruesome scene, and he doesn't want him to be kind of upset about this. He just wants him to leave the castle while he's still cured. Novellen is very confused about this. He says, it beggars belief, Geralt. All those years, and now, how can it be? There's a grain of truth. He said it. he said the title. It's amazing. But he says there's a grain of truth to every tale. Love and blood both have incredible power. Mages and adepts have been beating their heads over this for years, but haven't gleaned anything except what, Geralt? The love must be true. And seeing that he really did love this monster, Novellen, and that she finally did die, this has somehow cured him of his curse. The curse was basically that as soon as he found true love, she would need to die for him to lift his curse. It's a little different than having to kiss a princess. It's a lot more dark, it's a lot more gritty, it's a lot more sad. Basically, your happy ending has to come to a not so happy ending. And the last panel is just a scene of Vanira's head on the ground next to all these blue roses, and Geralt and Novellen walking away. And it's a very pretty sight. Once again, with the color palettes, this one's more of like a bunch of oranges and purples and blacks. And it's very neat. You actually see yourself smiling up at the blue roses. And I don't know if she died with happiness, but that is the end of our story. And I gotta say, hopefully I did a good job at explaining this, but I really did enjoy this. I thought it was super interesting to come meet a beast, figure out his entire origin story, no matter kind of how dark it was. Honestly, it's pretty fucked up. Not exactly something that I wanted to tell a story about, but it is a part of this book, and I felt I had to mention that. And overall, I think this is a good adult story, almost like a bedtime story for adults. It's kind of short and sweet, probably only take you about a half hour to read. But Geralt's writing is very much like him. You don't really lose a lot in that. It feels like Geralt, it feels like The Witcher. The language that they use does feel like The Witcher canon. And on top of that, the artwork is great as well. So for $12 for this hardcover, I gotta say, very much worth it. Add it to your collection. Go check out these other books. And I really think that I would probably give this thing an 8 out of 10. I think it was better than average. I don't think it was the coolest story ever, but it was a good way to break into the Witcher comic books itself and break into one of the actual written stories by Andrzej Sapkowski, which is the man who actually wrote all the Witcher tales, the guy that was actually trying to sue CD Projekt Red over not being paid enough for his stories. I think that's what it was. But yes, just a great little story to be read, something good for the collection. This hardcover is actually very pretty. You got this nice like golden picture of Geralt surrounded by all these blue roses and the door knocker that was on the front of the keep's gate. And I'm just very glad that they went hard on this, alright? It didn't feel like just kind of some kind of rushed title for the TV show or the game. It very much felt like its own thing. I don't know if the grain of truth is in any of the games as a quest line, which would be pretty interesting. I would like to see that maybe, but it's not something that I can remember this. But yes, everybody, thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think down below. Maybe go purchase this book for yourself. I left out some parts that I didn't think I really needed to add in, some stuff just to make sure I didn't spoil the entire thing, so it'd still be worth reading on your own. And I'll definitely be checking out more of these bad boys. Now, if you want to see more of this, if you could, please subscribe or like or comment. Let me know some things you might want to see down in the comments. And you can also find me on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, where I just post about what I'm reading, and you can have a nice little chat with me there. But yes, guys, once again, thank you so much for watching. I hope this was enjoyable, and I'm just excited for the next stories that I have to tell you guys. So, have yourself a fantastic day. Hope you enjoyed, and I will see you guys on the next episode of From the Heart.